For several years now, Pokemon form changes have gotten progressively more wacky, and over the past few generations, legendary Pokemon have not been exempt from this, as several groups have either been upgraded or completely reimagined. But why did Game Freak opt to start doing this? So good morning everybody, good morning, it's JPR, and today let's go over every reimagined legendary Pokemon and the reasons why Game Freak did it. The first legendary Pokemon to get a new coat of paint was none other than the OG himself, Mewtwo in Pokemon X and Y. Not only did it get 2 Mega Evolutions, which, makes sense, unlike some other Kanto fan favorites I know, but its Y Mega Evolution in particular was the very first one to be revealed, before we even knew what Mega Evolution was. This caused all kinds of internet rumors and speculation, mostly because they didn't even confirm if this was actually Mewtwo or not. It could have been the long-awaited Mew 3 for all we knew. But as we now know, Mega Evolution is a sudden genetic change in a Pokemon which fits Mewtwo to a T. He honestly could have been the mascot for Mega Evolution if they just pushed it a little bit more. As the genetic Pokemon, Mewtwo's 2 Mega Evolutions emphasize 2 very different types of evolution. The X Mega Evolution, which adds the fighting typing and emphasizes Mewtwo's physical attack stat, is a representation of physical evolution, while Mega Mewtwo Y is more a representation of mental evolution. It retains Mewtwo's strong focus on psychic powers and enhances them even further. So why did they choose to reinvent Mewtwo, one of their classic fan favorites, as one of their first test subjects? Well, a variety of reasons. As I already mentioned, I believe the crossover of themes between Mega Evolution and Mewtwo, being those genetically aligned Pokemon, played a very large role in it. Having 2 distinct forms also just adds fuel to the version warfire. People can constantly fight about which Mewtwo form they think looks better, and it further differentiates the 2 games. And of course, X and Y relied heavily on Kanto inspiration. I assume on purpose because as the first fully 3D titles, they wanted to make the game still feel familiar to legacy fans. Which is why you have Kanto starters, a Snorlax in the road, and of course the legendary birds and Mewtwo. Oh, and it's easy promotion for Mega Evolution and the games as a whole as they use it to reinvent literally their most iconic legendary Pokemon. And just like how Game Freak has been reinventing these legendary Pokemon, you can be reinventing your art skills thanks to the sponsor of today's video, ArtWad. ArtWad is an online drawing program designed for artists of all levels. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned veteran, there's always an opportunity to improve your craft. Sometimes the hardest part of drawing is just knowing where to start. So many people that I've talked to just don't have the confidence to pick up a pencil. They think their drawings will be bad before they even make them. But ArtWad makes that easy by providing you with bite-sized, easy-to-understand lessons that guide you through the drawing process, helping you to improve your art regardless of whether it's landscapes, portraits, characters, or anything else. It honestly feels like a game as you progress through the lessons. And before long, you'll be creating awesome art pieces that you can feel proud of. So whether it's for you or a kid in your life, give ArtWad a try and see your artwork rise to new levels. Currently, they're running a huge discount on their yearly plans, and right now you can click on my link in the description down below to get 30% off of their premium plan. Make sure you check out the link down below because this offer won't last long. Thank you ArtWad for sponsoring, let's get back to the video. Following up on this, we have the Weather Trio from Hoenn, who received 2 Primal Reversions and a Mega Evolution. Although, Primal Reversion is functionally almost exactly the same as Mega Evolution, just with the added bonus of making VGC a little more broken. I think the main purpose here was mostly to help show off how different Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire were meant to be from the original titles. Fire Red and Leaf Green, as well as Heart Gold and Soul Silver, were mostly faithful remakes while still adding a few things here and there. Oras was a very large departure from this approach, as they're not just remakes, they're in an entirely different universe. Which of course the reason is related to Mega Evolution, why wouldn't it be? But for Groudon and Kyogre specifically, their Primal Reversions are not only meant to be mirrors of Mega Evolution, but also enhance the narrative of the plot and how truly deadly these creatures are. In Gen 3, abilities were a brand new thing, so drought and drizzle causing planet-wide disasters? Sure, I can believe that. But now? Torkoal and Pelipper get these abilities! I am no longer sold! So Oras addresses this by basically saying that Groudon and Kyogre used to be much more fearsome in the ancient past and have abilities that far transcend what they have today. Kind of like how birds are technically dinosaurs, but they're so far removed from their ancestors that they're not really big or scary anymore. At least, that's what the government wants you to believe. Groudon getting the fire typing here is particularly satisfying because, as anybody who passed a 5th grade geology class should already know, fiery volcanic forces are responsible for the formation of land on Earth. and it was kinda dumb that Groudon wasn't part fire type already. The existence of these two forms also cleans up something that goes completely unexplained in the original Gen 3 games, that being the importance of the Cave of Origin. Here it is clearly stated that the reason why Groudon and Kyogre go here is to reclaim the ancient energy that is kept at the bottom. Neat! As for Rayquaza, I'm pretty sure they just wanted an excuse to make an awesome Shenron-inspired Ultimate Dragon Pokemon, but still, Mega Rayquaza does redefine the lore for Mega Evolution, and kind of needed to be comically overpowered if it was to retain its role as the soother of the other two. But again, among all of these reasons, I think the main reason for Game Freak revisiting this trio is to boost the sales of these remakes and convince fans that these were not the same old Hoenn games that they had played before. Remakes traditionally had struggled to sell nearly as many copies as the new core games did. And in this case, it actually worked, as they became, at the time, the highest selling remakes ever. Also, yeah, Mega Latios and Mega Latias happened. Yes, I admit it, I completely forgot these two in the outline for this video, but basically they were just made to advertise the soaring feature. I can confidently say this because the Terra Leak told us that soaring was supposed to be an X and Y feature, and Latios and Latias were also supposed to be X and Y Megas, but since soaring got delayed, they did too. There, the end. Hey, it's me again. If you've learned anything new in this video so far, I would really appreciate it if you left a like and subscribed. It's free. The next legendary group to be reimagined would be none other than Generation 1's remaining legendary Pokemon, the legendary birds. Being reintroduced with new Galarian forms in the Crown Tundra DLC for Pokemon Sword and Shield. The three of them were meant to show adaptations to Galar's harsh climate, as they abandoned their original typings in favor of dark, psychic, and fighting. They're also described as being much more aggressive and cruel than their Cantonian brethren. This one actually works quite well, because if any group of legendary Pokemon would be numerous enough to get regional variants, it would be these guys. We're long past pretending that the birds were one-of-a-kind species like some other legendaries are. It has been made very clear that multiple iterations of them have existed across multiple forms of Pokemon media. Shameless plug for an older video of mine. They also serve as the regional variant idea pushed to new heights, as I think most of us expected to only ever see completely average Pokemon get these forms. Maybe they just needed to find some form change that would rejuvenate the fans after the temporary retirement of Mega Evolution, so it's possible that was their game. Not to mention that the birds definitely needed an upgrade. Over time, power creep had turned them into one of the weaker legendary trios. Yes, Zapdos does still put up decent numbers in singles, but aside from that, you don't often see these guys dominating the competitive landscape. So, the Galarian birds were probably an attempt to at least raise them to the standards of modern-day legendaries, and they did kinda succeed, at least with Moltres. The theme of the Crown Tundra was also exploration, and the legendary birds tie into that pretty nicely, as they were the original legendaries that you had to go off the beaten path to hunt for. And in these games, they become the first roaming legendaries in an open-world setting, which is pretty cool. I think this is likely the same reason why the Regis were brought back and expanded upon in this DLC, as they're also heavily associated with exploration and puzzle solving, which is what the Crown Tundra is all about. Moving on to Legends Arceus, the only legendary Pokemon to receive redesigns here were of course Dialga and Palkia, who gained origin forms of their own, much like Giratina did in the past. Design-wise, these two are meant to articulate the chaotic time period from when they were both born. If I had to guess, their designs probably became more refined and elegant over time. They're also very intentionally meant to resemble Arceus itself, which may explain why both the Pearl Clan and the Diamond Clan mistook them as Arceus in the ancient past, because the only other explanation is that they're just kinda stupid. Overall though, this may be the first instance of legendary Pokemon being redesigned for a purpose that wasn't strictly marketing a new product or feature within a game. In all honesty, it was actually a pretty well-kept secret, as not a lot of people knew Origin Dialga or Palkia existed until the climax of the story. It is pretty perplexing though, because there's not actually a ton of new material or lore revolving around these forms in the actual game, so it's hard to say why Game Freak actually decided to make them. However, leaked internal documents say that they decided to make these forms due to the lack of new content presented in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. And they still wanted to give Sinnoh fans something new to be excited about, because nothing is as exciting as Horse Palkia. Moving on to even more ancient forms of well-known legendary Pokemon, we have the Paradox Beast trio of Entei, Raikou, and Suicune, now known as Walking Wake, Raging Bolt, and Gouging Fire. I already touched on these guys in my dedicated past Paradox Pokemon video from a few months ago, but I'll quickly go over why I like these three. It's mostly because they take the term paradox very seriously. as we established Pokemon fans are already well familiar with the legend of the Burned Tower, which gave birth to the original Beast Trio roughly 150 years ago. If that's true, then how could they possibly have ancient forms? And, well, yeah, that's the point. They shouldn't. But since Paradox Pokemon come from alternate timelines, these three were the perfect candidates to use for ancient form Pokemon that shouldn't exist. I only wish that we had gotten more weird contradictory stuff, like past Porygon Z, or cast form. But I guess Sandy Shocks fills that role pretty nicely already. But yeah, given how integral Paradox Pokemon were to the ending of Scarlet and Violet, I'm pretty sure the Game Freak had always intended to do a reimagining of a past legendary trio, and it just so happened that the Beast Trio were the perfect fit for this concept. However, discussing the opposite side of the fence, we have the Paradox Swords of Justice, who I haven't discussed in any videos before because, well, there's just not a whole lot to discuss. My guess as to what the paradox is here is that the Swords of Justice are meant to be protectors of nature who guard Pokemon against human expansion, and now they've become a part of that expansion themselves. You know, kinda like you were supposed to destroy the Sith, not join them! They're kinda like the last Pokemon you would expect to be turned into hulking metal robots. I'd like to dive deeper into their origins, but unfortunately almost all of the Paradox Pokemon have the most meaningless flavor text dex entries that I've ever seen. Though I like how Iron Boulders describes it as a Terrakion that had been modified by an evil organization. It feels like a nice parallel to Genesect and Team Plasma. Maybe Team Plasma did create Iron Boulder in some other timeline. And ironically, this dex entry comes from Scarlet, the game that's not even supposed to have future paradoxes! Now that's a paradox! So, alright, admittedly, I don't have as good of a reason for why Game Freak revisited this trio as I do for the Beast Trio. I honestly would not doubt it if they came up with the idea for the Paradox Beast Trio first, and then went, well crap, now we need to do a trio for the other game. And so the Swords of Justice were chosen just for their vague resemblance to the Beast Trio, and they had to completely ignore Keldeo for it to work. But also, this could have been the plan from the start, with both Paradox Trios representing the two parts of Scarlet and Violet's DLC. Kitakami is a very traditional Johto-adjacent feeling region, while Blueberry Academy is a super high-tech futuristic project in the Unova region. Honestly, I'm a little ashamed that I didn't draw the connection until scripting this video. It feels so obvious in retrospect. But from the Mega Mewtwo forms to the Paradox Beasts, it seems that Game Freak approaches most of these legendary redesigns with a careful blend of storytelling, design, and a little bit of nostalgia. In some ways, these reimaginings of existing legendary Pokemon serve to expand their mythos to new heights, creating new questions for Pokemon that we thought we had already figured out. There are definitely a few shameless plugs in there too, like Mega Latios and Latias, who were just meant to promote the new game mechanics, or the Primals, who were specifically made to sell more copies of Oras. But for the most part, they're reinventing legendary Pokemon for both the old fans and the new generation, making each encounter feel both familiar and extraordinary. So, which of these legendary reimaginings do you think was pulled off the best? Let me know in the comment section down below. But don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and I'll see you guys next time.